the start of the movie, we see a woman named Claire in an elevator taking her to the Blackwood Pharmaceuticals lab, where she will be taking part in a drug test. In the elevator, an ad is playing about the clinical trial she will be undergoing. She arrives at the room to which she has been assigned. Inside, she meets her roommate Allison, who tries to start a conversation with her, but Claire ends the conversation because she is exhausted and feels annoyed by her. They get summoned to the examination room before Claire can rest. Inside the room, we see a total of 7 participants for the clinical trial. The room they are in seems to have no cell service, making it hard for them to contact anyone outside the underground facility. A woman is introducing herself as Dr. Burke walks in and explains the test. Participants will take minimal doses of a drug, and the effects on them will be recorded. She tells the participants that they will be locked inside the facility for 5 days when the trial ends. Some participants don't look pleased with this, but they go along with it. The participants are given their first dose right then, as the other participants are taking their pills. Claire seems uneasy until it's her turn. They are then monitored to see if they have any side effects, and we see Claire undergoing some tests. As she tries to get some sleep that night, she gets interrupted by Allison, who tries to start a conversation. Claire gets fed up by Allison, and as she gets up to tell Allison to shut up, she gags and runs to the washroom to vomit. When she gets out of the washroom, she runs into Amir, another participant. They chat a bit, and Amir tells Claire that he is a medical student. He is participating in the test, so he could get a chance to work for Blackwood. Later, Claire tries to sleep again, but she can't. She gets up and notices that Allison is not on her bed. She decides to go through the halls looking for her and finds her with the rest of the participants, all of them unable to sleep. The next day, Dr. Burke tells Amir that the lack of sleep is nothing to worry about as she runs some tests on him. But when she is alone, we see Dr. Burke on the phone with her supervisors, telling them that the drugs are harming the participants. She seems concerned for them, but the supervisors order her to continue with the test. Dr. Burke informs the participants that the trial has changed and that Blackwood wants to see how long the subjects can stay awake. The participants are given their pills, and we see Claire with a tiny cup in her hand that has 3 tablets instead of the one they should be taking, meaning their dosage has increased. In the next scene, we see the pills increase again, and the participants get concerned about the dosage, so they refuse to take the pills. Dr. Burke walks in and tells them that they are free to leave at any point. But there is a bonus payment of 30,000 euros each for anyone who stays until the end. The participants get excited about the news, but Amir and Claire seem to have their doubts. Dr. Burke at the conference contacts her supervisors again. She tells them to stop the trial because it is destroying the subject's immune system. But one of the supervisors tells her to keep increasing the dose and see what happens. Next, we see the participants together, talking about what they will do after the test. Allison suggests to Claire that they find somewhere and live together, but Claire rejects this and asks Allison if she doesn't have any friends. Allison gets upset with what Claire said and decides to leave the group. Meanwhile, Amir is eavesdropping on Dr. Burke in her office. When she leaves, he sneaks into Dr. Burke's office and begins going through her computer. He looks at their test results and notices that something is wrong. Terrified by what he saw on the computer, Amir takes a flash drive from the desk and tries to copy the data. We are then taken back to the other subjects who were watching the TV, when suddenly the program is cut short and white noise comes from the TV. Claire looks at the other side of the room and sees Allison sitting alone. She walks up to her and tries to apologize for what she said earlier. As she starts talking, she realizes that Allison's eyes are closed and blood starts to come out of her eyes, nostrils, and ears. Claire panics and calls the others as she tries to wake Allison up. Shortly after, Allison has a seizure and dies right there. Dr. Burke witnesses everything from the doorway, standing frozen and staring in shock. Suddenly, a voice starts announcing that there is a security breach and they have 30 seconds until lockdown. They all start running towards the exit, except for Claire, who is still in shock from Allison's death. Paul comes back and tells her they have to go. Dr. Burke makes it to the red door that was already half closed. She tries to slide through it, but unfortunately, the door pins her and tears her stomach. A subject called Ray pulls her back in, but the wound is too deep, so she bleeds and loses her life. The clock begins a 24-hour countdown. Amir catches up to the rest of the team, and they tell him what happened to Dr. Burke. Amir, who is still in shock, tells them to stay awake no matter what they do, because if they fall asleep, they will die. He then tells them that he saw their scans in Dr. Burke's office and explains that the pills they took overworked their brains, and now their brains are trying to shut down. The The situation seems dire for the test subjects, but Amir tells them that if they stay awake, they won't die. So they have to stay awake until the lockdown is complete, then get out of there and get help. Amir explains that the facility is closed and all communications have been cut off for 24 hours. When he gets asked how the lockdown happened, he says he doesn't know, but it is clear from his face that he knows what happened. As Amir explains the situation, he hands the rest of the team members some smelling salts to wake them up when they feel drowsy. We later see Amir running tests on Claire, but he can't help much because he doesn't know about the drug. After seeing the results from the computer, he sends Claire out of the room with a grave look on his face. In the hall, Claire gets dizzy and starts hearing things. She decides to take out her phone and record a video message for her mother in case she doesn't survive. We then see Marcus whistling in the washroom. Moments after he stops whistling, he hears another whistling, but there is no one around. He opens the tap and sees the water running, but there's no sound. He shuts off the tap, and a few seconds later, he hears the sound of water coming out of the tap, which is strange since he'd already turned it off. Marcus walks out of the washroom and steps into the hallway, where he sees the red exit door opening. He follows it and steps in. A few minutes later, we realize that he was hallucinating. He is now on the floor, dead with blood all over his face, with the others surrounding his body looking at him. The situation is now looking really bad, and Claire realizes that Blackwood might silence them even if they survive, so she regroups with the others and suggests that they work together and try to escape. She puts a hand-drawn map on the table and tells the rest of the team about breaking the wall so they can get to the other side. Amir tells them it won't work. The place is built so that nothing can leave during a lockdown, but the others try to escape either way. They start breaking down the wall in turns, using one axe. After hours of digging into the wall, Paul reaches the end, but unfortunately, they see a steel wall on the other side. Claire decides to go see Amir for a new plan. After she leaves, Ray starts voicing his concern that Amir might be working with Blackwood to the rest of the group. Claire finds Amir and asks him for a plan, but Amir seems to have lost hope. He hands Claire a note explaining that everything was his fault. It was actually Amir who accidentally set off the emergency lockdown when he tried copying the files to a flash drive. After handing over the note, Amir tries to sleep and die, but Claire talks him out of the guilt, and together, they come up with a plan to keep themselves awake until the time is up. Claire leaves Amir to go join the others, and she runs into Paul, who tells her about Ray's suspicions. As they are talking, the power goes off. Paul and Claire begin looking for the main switch to turn on the power. As they search in the dark, Claire begins hallucinating again. She starts hearing voices, then she sees Allison with blood on her face, and right then, the power gets back on. In the next scene, we see Paul, Claire, and Vanessa questioning Amir. They suspect that he is the one who cut off the power. Ray comes in from the back and punches Amir in the face. He then drags him across the room and ties him up, then takes a knife, which he plans to use when interrogating Amir. Claire stops Ray before he can do anything by telling everybody that Amir is working on a cure. Ray doesn't trust Amir and thinks he will poison them, so Claire volunteers to take it first and see if it will work. With everybody in agreement, Paul begins making the cure under Amir's instructions since Amir is still tied up. As the others are working on the cure, Vanessa and Ray come up with a plan to distract Claire so that they can inject Amir with a sedative and see if sleeping will kill him to prove if he took the test drug like the rest of them. When the drug is finally ready to be tested and everyone is focused on Claire, Vanessa slowly makes her way towards Amir. She suddenly hears a bottle falling and turns around to see herself lying on the floor. The rest of the team rushes to help Vanessa, but it's too late. They try to inject her with the drug they just made, but she knocks it away during her seizure. What was left gets knocked onto the floor during the panic. After Vanessa dies and the survivors await their doom, Claire decides to go check how much time they have left. She tries reading the clock, but she starts hallucinating again. Her surroundings become black, and she is unable to see. Claire tries taking another video for her mother, but she starts feeling sleepy. So she takes out a smelling salt but accidentally drops it, and she collapses onto the floor. As she tries to reach for the salt, she begins floating, but she swims in the air, trying to reach the salt. She finally gets to it, breaks it open, and sniffs it, waking up instantly. As she stands up, she leans on the wall for support and notices that there's a secret door behind it. She goes back to the rest of the team and tells them what she found. Paul goes with her, and breaks down a part of the wall to reveal a door. They walk through an empty autopsy room, coming across a space inside that resembles an elevator. Claire feels a sense of relief and is eager to rescue the remaining survivors. However, Paul intervenes, suggesting they leave them behind. Meanwhile, Amir also starts hallucinating and sees the dead Dr. Burke telling him to free himself. In another room, we see Ray saying his goodbyes to Vanessa. He then notices Amir's note in her pocket, saying that he is the cause of the lockdown. Filled with anger, Ray goes after Amir. Next, we see Amir attempting to grab a knife next to him as Ray enters, his eyes filled with a deadly purpose. Upon spotting Ray, Amir shouts for help, frantically tugging at the ropes that bind him. Hearing Amir's cries, Claire rushes to his aid. Ray takes a scalpel and threatens Amir with it, but before he can do anything, Amir breaks loose and pushes Ray, accidentally stabbing him with the scalpel on the neck. Amir is confused by what has happened at first, but he snaps with anger and grabs the knife, then stabs Ray multiple times. Claire and Paul walk into the room and see Amir on top of Ray with the bloody knife. Claire asks him to put the knife down, but Amir begins chasing them and tries to kill them too. Paul and Claire begin running to the autopsy room, but Paul gets there first and locks the door before Claire could get in, fearing that Amir would get to them if he waited. Amir chases Claire into the MRI room. The two clashed and accidentally switched on the MRI machine. Amir knocks Claire down and tries to stab her. Luckily, the knife gets pulled by the MRI's magnet, so in the confusion, Claire hits Amir and runs away. Back in the autopsy room, Paul gets into what he thought was an elevator and activates it. The little room begins getting scorching hot until it's too late when Paul realizes he has locked himself inside an incinerator. Claire hides in another room where she passes out, and Amir also passes out in the hall near the exit door. The lockdown timer finally runs out, and the red door opens. Amir wakes up and walks through the door, where he meets men in white suits with guns. Claire hears a gunshot, which wakes her up, so she gets up and finds her way out. In the hall, she sees body bags containing the other participants. The exit door is fully open, but Claire knows that if she leaves, she won't get far before the men in white find her, so she gets into a body bag and plays dead. The cleanup team packs Claire and all the bodies in a car and drives off. Claire then gets out of the bag after feeling that they are far enough away. When the driver sees her, he gets freaked out and accidentally crashes the car. Claire gets out of the car and finally collapses on the road. At the end, we hear a news reporter say that after 7 months of investigation, Blackwood has been cleared of all charges, and they have concluded that Dr. Burke was responsible for the test, which killed 6 of the participants and left Claire in a coma she may never wake up from. But as the movie ends, we see Claire waking up. Shocked by Claire's survival? Will she expose Blackwood? Like the video if you're on her side, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to catch our next movie recaps.